At that time, the city was busy and the office was quiet. Then Detective Nolan got a call. A body had been discovered at the prestigious Riverview Apartments in the heart of the city. As he arrived on scene, police officers had already started cordoning off the area. Nolan ducked under the crime tape and made his way up to apartment 8D. The door was already open, and the pungent smell of death hung thick in the air. He steeled himself before stepping inside. The victim was Malcolm Grayson, a wealthy investment banker in his mid-40s. His body was splayed out on the living room floor in an unnaturally twisted position. A pool of deep crimson had formed underneath him, still wet and glistening under the overhead lights. Nolan leaned in for a closer look. Grayson's face was frozen in a rictus of pain and horror, his eyes wide and unblinking. But the most chilling part was the object protruding from his chest. A slender fencing épée had been driven straight through his heart. The detective ran a gloved hand along the twisted metal. This was no novice crime of passion. This murder had been precisely and meticulously executed. He turned to the forensics team.
I want every inch of this place dusted and combed over. Whoever did this was skilled, calculated, and they've left me a trail of breadcrumbs to follow. It's time to start picking them up, one by one.
Detective Nolan studied the crime scene photos carefully as the forensics team went over every inch of the apartment with a fine-tooth comb. Malcolm Grayson's body had been removed, but the blood spatter and disarray of furniture told a brutal story.
Looks like one hell of a struggle took place before the killer landed that fatal blow,
Nolan muttered. His partner, Detective Donald Rivers, nodded grimly.
We've accounted for 3 people who had major beef with Grayson recently, enough to possibly want him dead.
The 2 detectives began reviewing the suspect files. Suspect 1, Jessica Marlowe, Grayson's ex-wife and mother of his 2 children. An acrimonious divorce 3 years prior had left her bitter and nearly bankrupt thanks to Grayson's legal team. Word was she still carried a burning resentment. Suspect 2, Oliver Browning, a former junior associate at Grayson's firm who was denied a promotion and partnership, which he claimed was due to Grayson's favoritism. He had a reputation for a volcanic temper. Suspect 3, Raymond Vess, the owner of a boutique investment company. It was rumored Grayson had swooped in on a major deal Vess was brokering, snatching it from under him at the last minute through unscrupulous means.
Based on financials and phone records, all 3 had clear motives,
Rivers said.
But which one actually did the deed?
Nolan's eyes were drawn to a curious shape formed by droplets of blood just inside the apartment door. Almost like some sort of cryptic symbol, he felt a tingle run down his spine.
I think our killer wanted to be found, but not before we solve this opening gambit riddle first. At the sound of my birth, all in the world will be hushed. Yet that incessant noise is my death eternal. What am I?
Rivers furrowed her brow.
What does it mean?
It means,
Nolan said with a wolfish grin,
that the game is officially afoot. We find the answer, we'll uncover our murderer.
The race against the clock had begun. Detective Nolan pored over the case files deep into the night, the weight of the riddle heavy on his mind. At the sound of my birth, all in the world will be hushed. Yet that incessant noise is my death eternal. What am I? He kept circling back to that strange bloody symbol by the apartment door. There had to be a connection, but he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The next morning, he called Detectives Rivers and the team together.
I want to re-interview the 3 suspects, see if we shook anything else loose.
As they made their way to the precinct, Rivers' phone rang. It was the forensics lab. He listened intently, her expression growing more grave.
What is it?
Nolan asked when he hung up.
That shape you spotted. They analyzed it further. It's not just random. It's an Ouroboros, the mythological serpent eating its own tail, representing the perpetual cycle of death and rebirth.
A chill went down Nolan's spine. This wasn't just a murder. It was a meticulously planned and symbolic execution. At the precinct, they started with Suspect 1, Jessica Marlowe. Her defiance from the previous interrogation had curdled into shaken nerves.
I didn't kill Malcolm, I swear it!
She pleaded through trembling lips.
Yes, I hated his guts for what he put me through, but not enough to do that.
They moved on to Oliver Browning, the hothead ex-employee. Sweat stained his collar as Nolan pierced him with a predator's stare.
I'm a passionate guy, not a murderous psychopath.
Browning snarled.
If I wanted Grayson dead, I would have put a bullet between his eyes like a man, not that bloody serpent magic act.
Finally, Raymond Vess entered the interrogation room with his $100 haircut and imperious sneer.
You think I killed Grayson in some sort of pagan, moon-worshipping ritual?
He scoffed.
That brilliant, depraved mind games with symbols and riddles? As fun as it sounds, I make my moves in broad daylight, Detective, like separating Grayson from his nest egg, completely legally, I'll add.
As the man droned on, Nolan's eyes drifted to Vess's expensive watch, the same ornate Ouroboros design as the crime scene. He felt them getting closer to cracking the case, but the final piece still snaked agonizingly out of reach. There had to be one more riddle to solve. Just then, Nolan's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He answered to a disguised voice reciting, "What immortal governs the tide of men's blood, yet is born again with each crime understood?" The killer was taunting them, but Nolan's mind was already solving the final riddle.
You're going to slip up,
He warned the raspy voice.
and when you do, I'll be there.
After a tense pause, the line went dead. A predatory grin crossed the detective's lips.
It's time we set the perfect trap for our snake.
Detective Nolan gathered his team, the pieces finally falling into place.
The first riddle. At the sound of my birth, all in the world will be hushed. Yet that incessant noise is my death eternal. It was referring to a newborn baby's cry and then a gunshot.
River's eyes went wide.
And the second riddle. What immortal governs the tide of men's blood, yet is born again with each crime understood?
The answer?
Nolan said grimly.
Justice. Rebirth through the solving of crimes and serving of justice. The riddles were a deranged calling card.
He pulled out his phone and replayed the disguised voice from the previous call. After running it through filters, an unexpected voice pattern emerged.
The caller, it was you, Marlowe. You're the serpent.
The unmasked Jessica Marlowe slumped in the interrogation room, a ghastly smile creeping across her lips.
Very good, Detective. You figured it out.
The sordid truth began spilling out. Years of being beaten down and controlled by her wealthy ex-husband had pushed Marlowe to a breaking point. She didn't just want to murder Grayson. She craved the theatrical, ingenious experience of toying with him first.
I was a member of an exclusive club for crime recreation enthusiasts.
She admitted. The Ouroboros symbol meant she had leveled up in their sordid game to commit the perfect murder. Nolan's fists clenched as she detailed how she had meticulously framed Browning and Vess, following Grayson's movements for weeks to catch him alone. When he returned home that night, she was waiting, fencing weapon in hand, ready to consummate her vicious masterpiece.
You're brilliant, I'll give you that,
Nolan said, unable to keep the disgust out of his voice.
leaving just enough tantalizing clues to try and impress us, make us play along with your sick riddles. But it was your need to take credit that gave you away.
Marlowe shrugged, unrepentant.
What can I say? I crave the art as much as the act.
As she was led away in handcuffs, Nolan felt no satisfaction.
If you've enjoyed diving into the depths of intrigue with Detective Nolan, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button below. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when the next case file drops. Ready to join me on the hunt for truth and justice? And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to crack the case before I do. So, gather your clues, sharpen your wits, and let's continue this journey together.